Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice.
Hello, ambitious dentist. Today, I have a self-hosted podcast episode for you. And the reason I have this self-hosted podcast coming up today is because I've been getting with more and more frequency the same question from listeners, people that I've networked with in Facebook groups, people I'm talking to on phone calls, and it's a very specific question and one that I'm going to do my very best to answer in as in-depth but as an unbiased opinion as possible. That question is, should I hire a dental CPA? You're probably thinking to yourself, yep, I've had that question before too. Why should I hire a dental CPA over some other type of CPA? What's the difference? Why should I be even considering this? And I'll be honest with you, I've got a lot of people on both sides of the fence on this, people that I very, very much respect on one side of the fence, and then a ton of people that I respect as well on the other side of the fence. And so I thought it'd be important for me to give some type of information from my perspective. And I'm 100% biased in this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I am biased because I own a dental CPA firm, Dentist Metrics. However, I'm also really, really open with how I think about things and, my perspective. And so I'm doing this almost in a self-serving fashion to kind of get my thoughts out there and to have people be able to listen to what it is I see. Because I have a bit of a unique perspective because, I ran a Generalist CPA firm for a number of years. And so I've seen both sides of the coin. I've seen both sides of it. And so I think that it's really important that you guys understand what it is a dental CPA does versus what a generalist CPA does and how to really determine if a dental CPA is right for you. So with no further hesitation, I'll just jump into it. So whenever you're considering a dental CPA versus a generalist CPA, I was trying to think about how to kind of approach this in a recording format, in an educational format that you guys can kind of understand. Because I could 100% probably talk about this for an hour and just, opining on different little facets of what is going on in the dental industry. And to me, whenever you're thinking about any type of decision, you have to kind of weigh the pros and the cons against each other. And so for you that are listening right now, I'm going to tell you my answer is going to ultimately be, it depends. I am actually probably one of the most vocal people about saying that not everyone needs a dental CPA. And I'll explain that in this discussion. So stay tuned for that. So what are the advantages to a dental CPA and what are the negatives? The advantages to a dental CPA should be, number one, they only work with dentists. Number two, they can devote more time to your case, more time to you as a business owner because of the fact that they are typically going to cost more than someone else. And so there's more revenue, so they're able to give you more of their time. They have more industry knowledge, so they're going to be able to talk to you about things inside of your business. They're going to be able to see, the ebbs and flows and be able to be somewhat of a coach for you. They're going to be able to help you with some of the things that occur in your business. So for example, I've had just this week, it's Thursday today, August 31st of 2017. And just this week, I've had 3-hour-long phone calls with different practice owners that are clients of mine talking about different bonus structures that they can take into their practice. They, read an article or they talked to a friend or a consultant has spoke to them about, some type of bonus structure to implement in their practice. And I'm talking them through it, the pros and cons I've seen of other practices of introducing bonus structures. Because to be quite honest, bonus structures are one of these things that there is no one size fits all. So again, I'm going to try really hard not to go off down a rabbit trail here, but it's not one size fits all. And it's important for the client to be able to reach out to me and be able to kind of walk them through, because they don't want to just blindly walk in to an issue. I take a lot of calls about the pros and cons to membership plans, who I've seen do a good job with consulting, who great business coaches are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because of the fact that I spend so much time in this industry trying to network with people and really help out my clients. And I hope that that's what all dental CPAs do. I'm obviously a bit of a unique bird because of the way that I just run the business and run my life, but I feel obliged to my clients to be as strong as possible in the business of dentistry so that I can help them in those cases. And then finally, the last advantage to a dental CPA that I could think of off the top of my head is that there's social proof. And that social proof is that there's other dentists using this person. If you've got other dentists that are happy with their service, understandably, then there's safety in that. That at least they're taking care of these people. That's a big bonus. That's a big value to you because you're not having to face that uncertainty. So to recap that, the advantages of the dental CPA are that they only work with dentists. They can devote more time. They should be able to devote more time to your file and give you more attention. They have more industry knowledge, or they should have a lot of industry knowledge if they live in this industry. And then finally, they're going to have, social proof. You're going to be able to, you're going to be able to have other dentists that are going to know these people and be able to refer you to them and be able to help you. Those are the main advantages. There are other advantages such as, what everyone talks about, how they only work with the dentist so they can focus on that singular industry. And I've spoke about this in the past. I feel like this is an advantage, but it may not be an advantage for everyone. And that is that, they're going to know if you send business mileage to them, that you qualify for that. I have personally worked in CPA firms. I know other CPAs that you would send business mileage in to that CPA. They would say, okay, thank you. And then whenever the tax return was prepared, they wouldn't put that expense on your tax return. The reason being is that they don't believe a dentist should qualify for business mileage. And that's, 100% not accurate. But they have a preconceived notion that is, dentists, they go to work every day. There shouldn't be any reason why they have to go on business trips. So just food for thought on that. That is an advantage for most dental CPAs, but I'm not putting that in the advantage pile for dental CPAs because of the fact that there are really good general CPAs that do that as well, or that can do that as well. So moving from the advantages to the disadvantages for a dental CPA, because there are some. Anyone who says there's not is painting an incorrect picture. So number one, a disadvantage would be cost. Typically, dental CPAs cost more than a generalist CPA, and they should, because of the fact that they have all those other advantages that we talked about. They are someone that they have more industry knowledge. They can, and all the other things we talked about. Another disadvantage is sometimes they can be far away. Some people in bigger areas of the country, they can be pretty close to a dental CPA. But for example, in Arkansas, while we help clients in over 20 states, we're the only dental CPA firm in the state of Arkansas. And so, if someone inside the state of Arkansas wants to use someone other than myself, even if they're in, on the northeast or northwest corner of Arkansas, they're going to have to go fairly far away to be able to receive some type of service. So that's a bit of a disadvantage, perceptually a disadvantage. We have a process where we spend a lot of time, energy, and effort, researching state tax laws and credits and things like that for each of our clients as they come in. And every year we update that. So we take care of that on our end. And that's just kind of built into our model. It's not something that's, just completely unapproachable, but it could be perceived as a disadvantage. There are 100% people that like to meet people in person to talk about things. And, that's not going to happen with me or my clients. We've got about, 100 practices that we help currently. And I meet personally with a client maybe once every month, whenever I'm actually sitting in front of them. Other than that, it's done through Skype or something like that, which some people actually would say that'd be an advantage. So to recap that, advantages of a dental CPA, they only work with dentists. They can devote more time to your file. They have industry knowledge. You have social proof of them. The disadvantages are typically its cost, and then maybe for some people it's going to be that they can be, a distance away from them. So those are the big advantages and disadvantages to the dental CPA. The advantages and disadvantages to the local guy or to the generalist CPA. Advantages, number one, it's basically the opposite of the dental CPA. The advantage is typically they cost less. Sometimes. They sometimes cost less. Believe it or not, there are local CPA firms that charge the same amount of money as I do for things. Depending on your geographic region. So for example, if you're in a very expensive area of the country, my firm is in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's a very low cost of living area. And so our fees are higher than our local competition, but they're lower than many other places around the country. And so, that could be an advantage if you find the dental CPA that works with you in that regard. The other piece of that is that, that cost does come at a price. And I'll get into that in a minute. But, the other advantage is that you can actually go to meet them in person. I mean, if they're in your town, and they're a local person, you can go to their office and sit down with them and put a bunch of stuff out on the table rather than showing it to them on a computer, and they're there. So that could be perceived as an advantage, just like it could be perceived as a disadvantage if you're far away. The other disadvantages are, they don't have any industry knowledge. They work with every industry under the sun. You typically won't have very much social proof. I hear from literally every dentist I speak to, oh yeah, this guy, he works with dentists, but he doesn't work with only dentists. Every CPA has a dental practice as a client. There's just so many dental practices that are out there that almost every CPA has a dental client. But that doesn't really mean a whole lot. And the other disadvantage to me is that they are typically based off of an hour-based model, which again, I'll get into that in a minute. Of why I feel like that is a disadvantage for some firms. So again, whenever I'm talking about all this, I have to paint a very wide picture because of the fact that not all dental CPAs are the same. Not all generalist CPAs are the same. Kind of the premise I want to leave with you guys is that you have to consider the age-old adage of, you can either have a cheap provider, you can have a fast provider, or you can have a good provider. Those are really the, kind of the three triangles of speed, price, and quality. Whenever you hit one of those corners more than the others, it pulls away from those corners. If you think of those three different service types or three different, values, basically, then if you think of that in a triangle, like in business theory, it is that if you were like to point a dot in between each of those of which strength it was for a business, if you're moving to one edge of the triangle, like say, for example, quality, you typically pull away from the other two. So cheap or fast, you typically pull away from that. And the reason being is that if it's a very high quality service, that provider will typically be overwhelmed with clients. And so in order to continue to give good quality, they have to start turning away clients. And the way they turn them away is by raising price typically. And if they don't, then their speed drastically reduces because they're just so overwhelmed. So that same trinity is in CPA firms and services. So keep that in mind as well. So, when I was talking about dental CPAs aren't the same, some focus on taxes, some focus on financial advisory services. So investment opportunities and retirement. Some focus on the business, which is, more consulting and things like that. And some focus on, multiple different things. So for example, our company, Dentist Metrics, we focus on people that are doing acquisitions, as well as people that are doing startup practices. And for dental practice owners that, typically have less than, they're in 0 to 5 years of ownership. And the reason being is that we spend a lot of energy on education for our clients to making sure that they understand how everything works as far as inside of their business. So that's an important point and distinction to remember. The next section I'm going to talk about is, and this is really important for you guys to understand, like I said, that you can't pigeonhole every single generalist CPA with the other CPAs. This is the point where I'm probably going to get on a little bit of a soapbox. And that is that if you go out there and you make the assumption that a dental CPA will save you more in taxes than a generalist CPA, I could probably make the argument that on average that statement would be accurate, but it's not 100%. It is not 100%. I get really, really ticked off whenever I hear people say my dental CPA saved me more money than a general CPA could, because that's just not true. It's just completely false. The inherent problem in all of this, I mean, I talked about some of the advantages and the disadvantages. The inherent problem is that, just like in dentistry, you don't know if you're going to be receiving top 10% quality and service or the bottom 10% quality and service. So for example, if I go to a dentist and they do a cleaning and an exam on me, I'm not going to know if I just had the worst dentist in the world take care of me or the best dentist in the world take care of me. I'm just not going to know. All I'm going to know is how I felt when I went there and if I was happy with the result. That's all I'm going to know. And it's the same in the CPA world. You don't know, as a end user of the services that are being received by the CPA, if you've just received world-class service or if you've just received terrible service. Most CPA firms, they focus on, most CPA firms try as hard as they can to help as many people as they can, which is 100% to be commended. And again, remember, I ran a CPA firm, which I cared deeply about my clients and their money. I deeply cared about their businesses doing well, and I deeply cared about them not overspending in taxes, and I deeply cared about them being compliant in their tax returns and preparation and planning and consulting, etc. And it really, really ticks me off whenever I hear someone say a dental CPA will save you more than a general CPA will, because I now run a firm that helps 100 dental practices, and I can tell you there are amazing generalist CPAs that are out there that would save you the same amount of money as the best dental CPA in the world. But again, the problem comes in that you don't know how to gauge if you have a fantastic service or a terrible service. The only thing you can gauge if you had good customer service. Were you happy with how everything went down? That's really the only type of feedback loop you can give to your CPA, because you don't know if you've received good service or not, because you probably don't know a whole lot about the tax code. And so you don't know if you've overspent or underspent. I was talking to a client or prospective client the other day, and they were telling me about a friend that showed them a form that they'd received from having their tax returns done by a dental CPA. And it was a form that said, this is how much you saved, and this is how much you would have spent if you had not gone with us. And I just my brain just exploded and ears started steaming out of my ears because of the fact that is so, so incorrect. If I had that sitting in front of me, I would bring that to my state CPA board and say, I don't want this firm in my state. I don't want them to be a member of my peers. I take my CPA designation with a lot of pride. I know that people trust us, and I don't like whenever people are insincere or, pretty much outright lie about their services. It's unethical. And it's a shame that occurs inside of any industry. But, sales are important for some people, and that's how they do their sales. So what I'm talking about is they literally had, 2 columns and said, this is how much money you saved. This is how much money you would have spent if you'd used a generalist CPA. And it's completely a lie. It's 100% a lie. There's no way that dental CPA firm knows if the generalist CPA understands section 199, which is not that complex of a section of the tax code for the domestic production activity deduction. There's no way to know. The only way you can know as an end user is if you bring it to your general CPA and say, look, here's this tax deduction that people in my industry are taking. help me figure out how to qualify for it. Only way I'd be able to tell that. And the feeling that, dental CPAs have a monopoly on that part of the tax code is insane. It's just not true. When I talk about, do you need a dental CPA? If I'm speaking from a point of, I know 100% there are fantastic general CPAs out there that can help you from a tax perspective just as much as a dental CPA can from a tax perspective. That unique selling proposition for dental CPAs does not exist anymore in my mind. Now, that being said, if you think about what I said earlier, the social proof of many dentists using a firm, that strengthens the possibility that that CPA is a good tax CPA. If you go off of the case of there's another CPA that's in town that's supposed to be a great tax CPA, and you go and use them, you're not going to know probably for 3 or 4 years until you have some data behind you if you've actually got one of those really good general CPAs. And you may still not know. I'll try to address a little bit of how to be able to tell that here in a bit. Hey, ambitious dentists, I wanted to share a very special message from today's SYDP podcast sponsor, Gusto.com. As a CPA and accountant who has worked with hundreds of dentists and small businesses across the country, there's a handful of common issues I see hold so many dentists and small businesses back. Now, one is obviously bookkeeping, and another is managing payroll. Look, whether you're an aspiring dental practice, business owner, or you've had multiple years of business and practice ownership under your belt, managing payroll for your business is just one of those things you'll always have to do. Now, you know that I'm all about using every tool and resource that you can so that you can focus on what you do best, dentistry. Fortunately, there's a payroll tool that helps you do exactly that, and that tool is Gusto.com. Now, Gusto, it helps you process your payroll easily, efficiently, and best of all, it won't break the bank. Now, at the time of this episode in fall of 2017, you can get top quality payroll management for your practice for just $39 a month plus $6 per employee. I've seen some other solutions go for double, triple, quadruple, quintuple that amount and not even deliver half the value or be as easy to use. It's honestly one of the best payroll softwares I've ever used. And what I like about Gusto is it specifically helps ensure that you don't make those silly do-it-yourself bookkeeping mistakes that cost you money and time. You don't know how many times I've had clients, put in incorrect payroll deductions because their software allowed them to just kind of run it themselves. They have, advances that get stuck into a payroll journal entry and it keeps going month after month. And then the tax return's all messed up. And there's so many little pieces, missed payroll deposits, missed payroll report submissions to the governments. And for the price of less than the cheapest dental marketing software that you can have Gusto.com manage your payroll and save you countless headaches. So as a SYDP listener, I don't recommend services or products often because of my incredibly high standards. In fact, with almost 100 episodes on the books, I can count on my 2 hands how many products and services I've recommended to you guys, which is why I can happily recommend Gusto as a solution to all of your payroll needs. Now, as a sponsor of the show, I've negotiated a deal with Gusto.com to get you 3 full months for free for your dental practice. Yep, 3 free months. Of course, it's a no-risk trial that you can cancel anytime. But I'm confident after giving them a try, you won't want to use anything else. Seriously, it's just that good. So to start your free trial, just go to gusto.com/dentistmetrics for your free trial for an easy-to-use, efficient payroll solution. Tell them Jonathan Van Horn from Dentist Metrics sent you. And now back to the interview. And again, that's gusto.com/dentistmetrics, METRICS. What I'm going to talk about now is kind of the reason there are bad generalist CPAs. And I shouldn't say bad general CPAs. There are definitely bad CPAs. Just like there are bad dentists, there are bad CPAs. And the way that I explain this is that the CPA world really became, it's just like any other industry. It came from a place of, there was a somewhat of an optimal way of doing business. And the way that used to be before technology really got here is that, you build like every other, you build like an attorney, you build like someone who charges by the hour. I would say probably, 80 to 90% of CPA firms that are out there are based around an hourly billed model. And that's where they started out from, and that's where they are today. And so, for example, let's say a firm started in the 80s and they started off of an hourly based model. Well, that firm, they had to go out and they had to go and strum up business. They probably didn't niche, because niching back then wasn't a thing, or it wasn't a thing that people really knew how to do, unless you were in like a big metropolitan area where there was a ton of a specific industry around. Their niche was basically that they were in a certain area of the country. Their niche was a location rather than an industry. And what happened is, they try and strum up business. They try and strum up business. They try and strum up business. They're charging an hourly fee every time they're working on a file or working on a client. They're generating revenue for their practice, and they start building. They start with one person, probably maybe an assistant or an administrative person, and they just start building. Eventually, they have to hire another bookkeeper or something like that to be able to help them out with something. Maybe they have to hire a payroll person to help them out with that. And again, they're still billing by the hour, by the hour, by the hour. Eventually, that owner starts to not be able to do things themselves because they're trying to build their business. And so they have to hire another CPA to work for them, or a staff accountant to work with them. And so that person they've been hired, and now they're expected to keep billing while they're trying to bring in business. And eventually what that firm ends up looking like, and again, this is a wide picture, but a lot of these firms end up somewhere similar to the one I'm describing. Eventually there's, one or two partners. They've got two higher level CPAs, maybe one higher level CPA that works with them that may eventually become a partner. They'll have, two or three staff accountants, maybe a senior accountant, which a staff accountant, someone who usually has 0 to 3 years of experience. A senior, someone who usually has somewhere between 3 and say 6, depending on what type of definition you're trying to accomplish. The manager level is typically, 7 years and above, until they become a partner or something like that, or a manager or whatever it is, a senior manager. And then they'll have an administrative staff as well as a bookkeeping staff, that is usually, somewhat around, say 4 to 6 employees. And that whole culture of that practice is built around having an hourly based model of trying to get that practice set up and running and getting as much billable time in as possible. And that was how everything was built, because of the fact that you just had to do the accounting. You had to do the tax return preparation. You had to get everything done. And you were helping every industry under the sun. For example, in the CPA firm that I helped run, that was a firm that we had oil clients, we had hairdressers, we had dentists, we had doctors, we had manufacturing companies, we had inventors, we had designers, we had everything under the sun. And we worked really hard at making sure they had, a really good experience. We focused on customer service. And, what happens is that there comes a time where you can't focus on everything. It's just not possible. So for example, I was working on a trucking company one day, and I was looking over the tax returns that had been prepared by this firm for 15 years, 20 years maybe. And it was a trucking company, pretty successful one. Over the road truckers, they hired truckers, they contracted out, and they paid people to go and truck things all over the country. And one day I was looking at their per diems that they were paying to their truckers. And I was looking at it, and I just so happened to find a tax court case that had to do with that, with their per diems and mileage and reimbursements and things like that. And that company had been doing that wrong for 20 years. Now, they'd been doing it wrong. I'll reiterate that. They've been doing it wrong for 20 years. And that firm, which was a very good firm, had been doing it wrong for 20 years. And no one had ever noticed it, because we didn't have time to research the intricacies of that business model. And so we talked to the client about it. We said, look, we need to fix how we're doing this. We need to go under compliance. We need to go back and amend tax returns to fix it. And that client ended up having to pay, quite a bit in taxes, because they'd missed that. It was one of those things where the error was in their benefit, but we went back in time and amended what we could and got them to pay as much as they could to correct it, because they were doing it wrong. And it was a very specific area of the tax code that was only there for truckers. And that happened all of the time. We had to depend on our clients to bring us information in order for us to be able to keep on top of it. Because, so for example, most people work 50 weeks out of the year, 40 hours a week. That's 2,000 hours out of the year, right? 50 times 40. Well, CPAs, it's a given you're going to work more in busy season. And so, for me, I probably, the last year that I worked there, I think I clocked in about 2,600 hours, and I billed out 2,000 of those hours. So if you think about that, I literally billed, what a normal person would work every, in a normal year, 40 times 50. I literally billed that many hours in a year. Plus I had 600 extra hours that I was there over the course of the year. So that's an extra 50 hours a week. So average work week was about 55 hours a week. And that is par for the course in the CPA world, because the business model is dictated around having billable hours. But the way the math works out typically is that people got to work their butts off, and they got to work a lot of extra hours. And so it's not because we aren't trying. It's not because we weren't trying. We were working really hard to try and help everybody out. But that is what a lot of general CPA firms are built around. That is how their model works. And if your CPA can't handle that, or they don't have a good grasp around it, then to me, they start slipping into what I would call the bad CPA category, because they can't effectively manage the relationship with the client. They can't effectively manage the consulting part of being a CPA. When I say the consulting part, when I think about CPAs in general, I think about there's kind of the consulting part, which is the business industry knowledge, as well as the planning and projecting and for taxes. And there's the compliance part, which is just getting a tax return done for you and having it filed and having you pay your taxes. Whenever you think about it from a CPA's perspective, what's the most important part by their perception? By their perception, it's to have the compliance part done. They got to get the compliance part done, or else they're gonna be up a creek without a paddle, because the clients are going to be, trying to knock their heads in because they didn't get their tax return filed on time, and they've got penalties and interest. So they focus more on the compliance side. And if you think about it, and this is the biggest issue with the hourly based model, if you think about it, there's actually a decentivized reason to actually become more efficient. Because if they become more efficient, then they have to get more clients in. So for example, I built out 2,000 hours. Let's say I figured out some way to be able to increase my efficiency by 10%. Great. Now I'm only going to bill out 1,800 hours. That means that the firm's going to lose out in, $40,000 in revenue. So guess what? We got to fill that time back up. we got to fill it up with more work, which means that, again, we have to now focus. We're even busier, but we're having to do more compliance. Now we have to focus even more on the compliance because we're so efficient on the other ends and that's just how it goes. That is the problem with the hourly based model in most CPA firms. There's a lot of burnout from the CPAs that work there. There's a lot of issues that happen in those firms. Again, wide breadth here. There are 100% hourly based firms that are amazing, and they do a fantastic job for their clients, and they are just as good as the best dental CPA firm out there. They're just as good as my firm, which I consider mine to be the best. I obviously want to consider myself to be the best dental CPA firm possible. If I didn't think that was the case, or if I wasn't trying to become that, then I wouldn't be doing this. That is really the issue with the general CPA model. And so that does carry over in the dental CPA model. I know there's dental CPAs out there that fall into that same category as the general CPA model does. But I typically see that most dental CPA firms are more value-based. And so they bill just a flat amount because they know what it's going to take. And that creates a lot of value for the client because of the fact that we can focus more on the consulting side than on the compliance side, because that issue that I talked about in the general CPA world and the hourly based model just doesn't happen as much. Okay, so I've talked to you guys about the advantages and disadvantages of each type of CPA. I've talked to you about how to look at how to think about it in terms of the trinity of cheap, fast, or good. I've talked to you about how dental CPAs aren't the same, as well as kind of getting you an understanding of the Generalist CPA business model. What I'm going to talk to you about now is how you can use a Generalist CPA to get pretty much the same results as a dental CPA. So a Generalist CPA the way that you would do this is, number one, you have to be very, very knowledgeable about your financials. Why do you have to be knowledgeable about your financials? Remember that I said that in the Generalist CPA model, you have to bring information to the Generalist CPA. The reason is that a lot of CPAs out there will just accept the information. And if you give them something and you say, hey, this was, here's my P&L, here's what meals and entertainment was, this was 100% deductible, this was 50% deductible. That would be on you to know that typically, because if you just give them meals and entertainment, they're just going to make it all 50% if you're lucky. You would have to know, okay, here's my P&L. On this meals and entertainment line, there's, say, $4,000 of expenses for the year. You give that to a Generalist CPA. Here's how the Generalist CPA is going to process that. Either one, they're going to take that $4,000, plop it on a tax return. You're going to get the 50% deduction for that. I won't go too far into this, but if you don't know this, meals and entertainment is only 50% deductible on the tax code, as long as it's an ordinary necessary business expense. So a lot of CPAs will just take that number, put it in there. Some CPAs will look at a detail of what that $4,000 was made up of, and they will ask you questions about what of this was 100% deductible. Here's what's 100% deductible. You tell them that, they put that, they correct the tax return. And finally, the third person, they would look at that meals and entertainment line of $4,000, and they would eliminate some or all of that and just not put it on the tax return. Yeah, I'm being serious. That happens a lot because of the fact that they would have a preconceived notion that dentists don't have any reasons to have meals and entertainment. There's no reason. There's no ordinary necessary business reason for a dentist to have meals and entertainment. There's people that think that. There are 100%. And so the way that you make sure that you're receiving good service with that is that you know what your P&L says, and then you know to look at your tax return at the end of the year and find where that $4,000 went. You have to find it. You have to go and look at it. So you've got to check it. You've got to make sure it's right. If it's not, then your CPA is doing one of those three categories that we just talked about in a way that may not be the best for you. So, again, if you're looking at your tax return, you see on the statement line that says meals and entertainment, it says $2,000, and you had $4,000 in expenses, that was treated as all 50% deductible. You may need to say, hey, that wasn't all 50% deductible. Some of that was office expenses. Some of that was, meals we catered for our staff. Some of that was, our Christmas party. Some of that was ABBB, whatever it is that is 100% deductible. You'll have to bring that to them, because what happens whenever that CPA receives that in front of in their file is a lot of the time they'll see that number and they'll say, okay, I could call this client and try to get a hold of them, but I know they're a dentist and they're not going to answer because they're with the patient. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to call them. I'm going to have to disengage from what I'm doing right now. I have to call them, have to leave them a voicemail message, maybe I'll have to email them, and then I'll have to wait for a response. And that will keep this file on my table. And it's going to cost probably about 30 minutes of my time to send them this question and receive it, process it, make a journal entry, get it in the tax return, fix things, etc. And that's going to cost the client about $75. Just throwing numbers out there. Is it worth it for me to ask this question to the person? Most of the time they'll just say no, because they've got to move on to the next file. Again, wide breadth here. A lot of CPAs, they would take the time, they'd call you, they'd make sure it was taken care of. But I know for a fact a lot of people will not make that phone call. So that's one thing. You have to understand your P&L, because you are going to have to figure out how to read that tax return and look at your P&L with it. Now, a lot of tax returns, they aren't going to look like your P&L. They're not going to look like your P&L or your balance sheet. A lot of CPA firms, they'll receive a P&L on the balance sheet. They'll do internal CPA only tax adjustments, and they'll never give them back to you to adjust your books, because they don't want to have to deal with the amount of time it takes, because they've got to send you the journal entries, and then they got to hope that you did them. And most of the time, clients don't do them. Most clients don't actually post those journal entries. And so a lot of the times they'll just keep it internal. And then you've got a tax return that doesn't look right compared to your internal financials. A couple of years go by of that, and it's the point of no return. You can't figure out where things went wrong. So you've got to, every year, make sure that you're talking to your Generalist CPA and having them update your financials. Now, again, you might have them do your bookkeeping. If they do your bookkeeping, you've got to be even more on top of this, because you're going to have to be looking at your P&L every month and then looking back at your bank statements and your credit cards to make sure they've processed it and put everything in the right categories. Because a lot of CPAs, they don't do it. Like, for example, if you had, let's say you spent $300 at a steakhouse for your Christmas dinner for the practice. A CPA sees a $300 thing going to a steakhouse, they're probably going to think you used the wrong credit card and that was a personal expense. And they're just going to put it to distribution rather than to an expense, unless they call you. And then again, we have the same issue we talked about beforehand. So you've got to be really on top of it. You've got to start really understanding the ebbs and flows of your P&L. You have to understand the ebbs and flows of your tax return. And finally, you have to be on top of the tax code. You have to understand what it is you are qualifying for and not qualifying for. So for example, Section 199, the domestic production activity deduction, is something that dentists, I believe, 100% qualify for. And if you bring a Section 199 issue to your generalist CPA and say, hey, I believe I qualify for this because of this, then you've got to then make sure that they're processing that for you as well. And they give you guidance on how to qualify and make sure you're audit proof and make sure that you can substantiate this deduction and that you get the benefit of it. And I know a lot of generalist CPAs that will see Section 199, they'll say, no, that's only for manufacturers. And then that's it. Like, they don't see anything else from it or whatever it is. And so you're going to have to be able to look and talk to your CPA, bring this information to them, and have them help you qualify for it. So I hope this discussion has kind of painted a light for you guys of what it is a general CPA looks like versus a dental CPA. To me, again, to talk about if you should use a dental CPA or not, to me, you should use a dental CPA if number one, you value proactive tax advice. That doesn't mean a general CPA doesn't give you proactive tax advice, but you should be expecting it from a dental CPA just as much as you should be from a general CPA. So I'm discussing with you guys, expect that from your general CPA. And if you're not getting it, then you need to probably be looking somewhere else. You've probably got one of those that is more focused on the hourly billing than they are on the consulting side. So if you value the highly likely circumstance that the CPA you're using is going to minimize your tax burden, then a dental CPA is a good match from a tax perspective. You should be using a dental CPA if you value the business industry knowledge. I mean, like I said before, we've got a ton of knowledge about the industry. We can give you a lot of advice and a lot of referrals to really great service providers and give you a lot of insight to how your business is doing. If you don't value that, then that you shouldn't be using a dental CPA. I mean, it's just as easy as that. And finally, you should be using a dental CPA if you want to, be using someone that is going to try and help your business long term. Not saying a general CPA won't do that, but I'm saying you're more likely to be able to receive that from a dental CPA. If you don't want to pay a premium for your services, then you don't value those things we just talked about, and you should probably go with a generalist CPA. But you should arm yourself with the things that we talked about today so that you can make sure you receive as high a value of service. Because, I saw someone speaking the other day that said that, incorrectly prepared tax returns can very easily cost high individual income earners, over $1 million in taxes throughout their life, throughout their business career. So, I mean, we're literally talking about, whenever you go to retire, you having $1 million in your bank account versus not having $1 million in your bank account. And that is if you're using what I would consider a bad CPA. And again, my definition of a bad CPA is someone who is not timely, someone who is not helping you minimize your tax burden, and someone who is overly expensive for the things that they do, I guess. If a generalist CPA does all those things and you don't value the business side of things, the industry knowledge, the having an extra point of reference for questions you have about your business, then you probably shouldn't be using a dental CPA. You can probably find a good generalist CPA, but be prepared to, again, arm yourself with the information we talked about today, as well as be prepared to probably try a few different CPAs over the first, 10 years of your business. Now, for people that are starting a practice or that are acquiring a practice, just a little caveat on that, you only really get a shot at that stuff over the first 3 years. If you get really bad advice over the first 3 years and then you got to go back and amend, it's going to be really, really expensive because it's really hard to go back very far in the past to figure out what someone else did. So for example, for me, figuring out what a Generalist CPA did on their tax returns based off of the source documents really far in the past, it's a big undertaking. So just be aware that, your first CPA is, when I say first CPA, I mean the first person to help you with the practice acquisition and startup and things like that, buy-in, whatever it is. That person is very important, that is done correctly, because you can mess a lot of things up on the acquisition or the startup, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really hard to go back and change any of those things. Okay, so I talked about that. I've talked about, if you should or shouldn't. Last thing I'm going to talk about is really the cost. So cost is something that is very subjective. It depends on what people are doing for you. And I'll let you know, our average client, again, this is of August 31st, 2017. Our average client, and the average number I see most CPAs charge is somewhere around $10,000 a year. That's about how much you should probably be investing in that relationship. Now, what do you get for that $10,000 is very different, I've found. So for example, for our firm, for that amount, it's typically a one doctor location, one location. It's a practice that usually is doing somewhere around $1 million to $2 million in revenue. And they don't have a whole lot of other business stuff going on other than the dental practice. If it's much more than that, it gets more if you've got, let's say if you have extra, other businesses that you have, if you have a rental real estate entity, if you have, if your spouse owns a business or something like that, it could go up or down. And we do all the tax consulting, planning, projections, preparation for that. And we also do all the bookkeeping for that. That's included in that price. I definitely know dental CPAs, they charge $10,000 for just the tax return. And I don't know how they do that, but they do. And, that more power to them. Maybe they're fantastic. Maybe they've got enough clients that they got to the point where that's how much they had to charge to be able to continue the quality of service that they demand of their firm, which I have a lot of respect for people that do that. So, for a generalist CPA firm, your cost is typically going to be, again, I'm trying to do as much apples to apples, and I'm going to use the general CPA firm I was talking about beforehand. For the general CPA firm I was talking about that I helped run before, you'd end up paying somewhere around $6,000 or $7,000 a year for similar services that Dentist Metrics serves, but you wouldn't get that extra value of the industry knowledge. And we do a lot of extra things, specialized reports for our clients that are centered around the dental industry that the other firm I helped run couldn't have done, but that's something that we do that's extra. So you're really looking at $2,000 or $3,000 difference and when you think about it in terms of percentages, the way that worked was it was about $400 a month for the bookkeeping services, and it was about $2,000 a year for the tax returns at the Generalist CPA firm. So that's $4,800 for bookkeeping, $2,000 for tax returns, the business plus the personal. So that's $6,800. You're talking about $3,200 difference. That's about a 40% premium for the dental CPA. And that's about what it is. So that's what you have to weigh of, is that value worth it or not worth it? Now, obviously the price would go up quite a bit depending on the complexity of your practice. If you've got multiple locations, if you've got multiple entities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then the price would go up or down based off of that. If you're a startup and you don't have a whole lot going on in the beginning, if you're, first year of acquisition and that's the only thing that you've got going on, and you're trying to build a practice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then, you'll probably be paying quite a bit less than that. Anyway, I hope that this has been really helpful for you guys. I covered a lot. I hope that you're able to stay with me. This is something I'm very passionate about. If you have any other questions about this, shoot me an email, jonathan@dentistmetrics.com. I feel very passionately that this is a very important piece of information for people to know about in the dental industry. So if you would, please give it a share. if you're in dental school, if you're an associate somewhere, share it with some dental friends of yours so that they have an understanding of this, because I see people getting taken for a ride a lot in this space, and it makes me sick to my stomach. It literally keeps me up at night, because I care a lot about my profession and I care a lot about you guys. And whenever I see you guys getting taken advantage of from someone inside of my profession, I get really, really agitated. But at the same time, I also understand that there's a lot of confusion about this industry. And so I hope I've done a really good job of explaining the different intricacies and why things are what they are. Let me know your feedback. Again, shoot me an email, jonathan@dentistmetrics.com, or head over to dentistmetrics.com and check out our website. We've got a lot of information on there as well to be able to help you out. And so thank you for giving me your time today. Have a great day.
And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice.